Car crashes can be a nightmare, but some are so disturbing they feel unreal. In this video, we'll show you the most horrific and tragic car crash deaths ever recorded. From brutal collisions at high speeds to moments that are beyond belief, these incidents will leave you shocked. Get ready to witness the terrifying reality of car accidents with 1 hour of the most disturbing car crash deaths of all time. It was April 10th, 1992. Sam Kinison, a famous comedian known for his loud, rebellious humor, was driving to perform in Laughlin, Nevada. Recently, Sam had made significant life changes, including marrying Malika Suiri, a 26-year-old dancer, and finding sobriety. The drive should have been routine, but it would end tragically. Sam had built a career as a wild, boundary-pushing comedian, but recently he had been trying to live a calmer life. He had just returned from his honeymoon and was excited for the future. That night, he was driving his white Pontiac Turbo Trans Am from his home in California toward Nevada, cruising down the desert highway. Meanwhile, a group of teenagers was joyriding in a Chevrolet pickup truck. The driver, 17-year-old Troy Pearson, had been drinking. The truck was full of beer cans and they were recklessly speeding on US Highway 95, swerving into oncoming traffic. Just 30 miles from Sam's destination, the truck swerved into his lane. Sam had no time to react and the crash was head-on. The collision crushed both vehicles. Sam's friends following behind him witnessed the entire incident. At first, Sam appeared to be all right. He had minor cuts and managed to get out of his wrecked car. His friends rushed over and tried to convince him to lie down, but Sam seemed dazed. He began walking around and talking as if he were speaking to someone who wasn't there. His longtime friend Carl LeBove held Sam's head, trying to comfort him. "I don't want to die," Sam repeated, his voice filled with fear. Then his tone shifted to confusion, asking, "But why?" Finally, his voice softened, as if he was accepting something, saying, Okay. A moment later, Sam collapsed. Though Sam initially appeared fine, he had suffered severe internal injuries from the crash. His head had struck the windshield and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. An autopsy later revealed major injuries, including a torn aorta and a dislocated spine. The damage was fatal, and Sam died soon after. Sam's wife Malika survived with only minor injuries. She was treated at a hospital and released the next day, but the emotional toll of the accident was overwhelming. The crash occurred on a remote stretch of highway near Needles, California, about 75 miles from Las Vegas. The desolate area was covered with gravel and weeds, and attempts to mark the site with a memorial were repeatedly thwarted as the markers kept being stolen. Troy Pearson, the driver of the truck, was charged with vehicular manslaughter due to gross negligence. He pled guilty and received probation, 300 hours of community service, and had his license suspended for 2 years. He now lives in Las Vegas. The news of Sam Kinison's death shocked his fans and the comedy world. Sam had built a reputation for his wild lifestyle and loud, controversial comedy. But his final moments revealed a vulnerability that few had ever seen. After surviving so many reckless experiences in his life, his death in this accident seemed especially tragic. Sam's career had been a whirlwind of success and excess. He became famous in the 1980s for his brash, outspoken humor. He appeared on television, released comedy albums, and performed to sold-out audiences. But behind the scenes, Sam had personal struggles, especially with addiction, which affected both his career and health. Born in Yakima, Washington in 1953, Sam was the son of 2 evangelical preachers. For a time, he followed in their footsteps, becoming a Pentecostal preacher himself. After a failed marriage and a crisis of faith, Sam left the ministry and turned to comedy. His intense theatrical style on stage reflected his background as a preacher. Sam's big break came in 1985 when he appeared on HBO's Young Comedian special. This launched his career, making him known for his loud, bold comedy. But as his fame grew, so did his personal struggles. By 1992, Sam was trying to get his life back on track. He had cut back on drinking and substance use and was focused on rebuilding his career. He had signed a 2-movie deal and was in talks for a variety show with Fox. His marriage to Malika represented a fresh start. Sadly, just as he was turning his life around, the accident cut his future short. Sam's death was a significant loss for the comedy world. He was buried in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where his gravestone reads, "In another time and place, he would have been called a prophet." was just after midnight on August 31st, 1997 in Paris, France. Princess Diana had spent the evening with her companion, Dodi Al Fayed, at the Ritz Paris, which was owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed. The couple had recently returned from a vacation on Mohammed's yacht and arrived in Paris the day before. It was a quick stop before Diana planned to return to London to reunite with her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. After her divorce from Prince Charles, Diana had been seeking more privacy. Her relationship with Dodi seemed like a fresh start, but the relentless paparazzi wouldn't leave her alone. That evening, the media followed them, making it impossible for them to enjoy a quiet dinner. So they chose to eat privately in the imperial suite at the Ritz to avoid the press. Just after midnight, Diana and Dodi decided to leave the hotel and head to Dodi's apartment. They hoped to avoid the paparazzi by sneaking out through the back exit. Henry Paul, the hotel's head of security, drove the black Mercedes S280. The plan was to leave unnoticed, but it quickly unraveled. Henry Paul, who was later found to have alcohol in his system, sped off with Diana, Dodi, and their bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones. Only Rees-Jones wore a seatbelt, a small decision that would have major consequences. As they drove through Paris, the paparazzi continued to chase them. Henri Paul increased the car's speed to outrun them, reaching dangerously high speeds. At around 12:25 a.m., the vehicle entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel at about 121 miles per hour. The car lost control, slammed into a concrete pillar, flipped, and came to a stop. A passing French doctor, Dr. Frédéric Maidiès, saw the crash and immediately stopped to help. The scene was horrifying. Diana was still alive but unconscious, while Rees-Jones was injured but conscious. Dr. Maidiès used a respiratory bag to help Diana breathe as emergency services arrived. By 12:40 a.m., it was clear that both Henry Paul and Dodi Al Fayed had died at the scene. Despite the tragedy, the paparazzi continued taking pictures of the wreckage. 7 of them were later arrested for their involvement. Sergeant Xavier Gourmelon, one of the first responders, recalled hearing Princess Diana's final words, "My God, what's happened?" After being freed from the wreck, she suffered cardiac arrest. Gourmelon performed CPR, reviving her briefly, but her condition was critical. At 2 a.m., Diana was rushed to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. Despite hours of surgery, her injuries were too severe. She had suffered major internal damage, including a tear in her pulmonary vein. At 4 a.m., Diana was pronounced dead at the age of 36. The news of Diana's death shocked the world. By 6 a.m., Dr. Alain Pavy, head of cardiology at the hospital, confirmed her passing during a press conference. Millions around the globe were devastated by the sudden loss of such a beloved figure. Prince Charles, along with Diana's sisters, flew to Paris to bring her body back to London. It was a heartbreaking moment, especially for her sons, William and Harry, who were just 15 and 12 years old at the time. In the aftermath, many questioned if Diana had been adequately protected. After her divorce, she had requested reduced security for more privacy, which lowered the level of protection she once had. Some wondered if the outcome might have been different if her security had remained the same. The crash also fueled conspiracy theories, with some questioning if it was truly an accident. However, a British investigation, Operation Paget, later concluded that the crash was caused by reckless driving and the paparazzi's pursuit, with Henry Paul's intoxication playing a significant role. Despite the official findings, many still wonder, what if Diana had worn her seatbelt? What if they hadn't left the Ritz that night? What if Henry Paul had been sober? These lingering questions continue to haunt those who mourn her loss. It was a quiet evening in November 2024 when a terrible crash happened on the RM12 motorway in La Manga, Spain. What should have been a routine drive turned into a disaster when a speedboat detached from a trailer and caused a deadly accident. 2 British men lost their lives and another was seriously injured. The incident began when a 32-foot speedboat, known as a narco lancha because of its use in smuggling, broke free from the vehicle towing it. These boats are built for high speeds, often with powerful engines to avoid detection at sea. This one, moving at about 120 kilometers per hour, suddenly detached, flew through the air, and crashed onto a Seat Leon carrying 3 British men. The driver and front seat passenger, aged 49 and 57, did not survive. The impact was too severe. The third passenger, a 54-year-old man sitting in the back, suffered critical injuries. Emergency responders quickly took him to Virgen de la Arequisaca University Clinical Hospital in Murcia, where he remained in serious condition. The crash led to further destruction. The impact caused a chain reaction involving 6 other vehicles. Some cars were pushed off the road while others overturned or were heavily damaged. Rescue teams spent over 30 minutes freeing trapped victims. Witnesses described a chaotic scene: twisted metal, shattered glass, and debris scattered everywhere. Several other people were injured, including 2 women, aged 18 and 55, and 2 men, aged 19 and 29. They were taken to hospitals in Cartagena with varying injuries. The motorway was shut down for hours as authorities worked to clear the wreckage and investigate what had happened. Investigators quickly realized that the boat was not an ordinary vessel. It was a high-powered speedboat often linked to smuggling. Its large size and weight made it extremely dangerous once unrestrained. With 2 300-horsepower engines, it became a massive projectile when it broke loose. Authorities, including the police and civil guard, launched an immediate investigation. They found that the boat had been secured to a trailer towed by another vehicle in front of the victim's car. However, because it was not properly fastened, it came loose and veered across both lanes. The Seat Leon's driver had no time to react. The crash was unavoidable. The driver towing the boat fled before authorities arrived. Investigators believe this person may be linked to smuggling operations. Another passenger might have been in the vehicle, but this has not been confirmed. A search began to locate the driver, but so far no one has been found. One of the key pieces of evidence at the scene was a set of supermarket receipts recovered from the wreckage. Authorities are now reviewing security footage from nearby stores, hoping to identify the suspect. The victims were later identified as PD, 49, JW, 57, and IP, 54, all British nationals. Their car was packed with golf clubs, suggesting they were heading to the La Manga Golf and Tennis Resort, a well-known destination in the area. The British Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office confirmed that they were assisting the victims' families and working with local authorities. Photos from the crash showed the speedboat still lying across the motorway surrounded by wrecked vehicles. The damage was severe, showing how destructive a loose object of that size could be. Authorities are now looking into possible criminal connections. The boat, identified as a Zodiac inflatable, had no visible registration numbers, making its origins suspicious. Officials are working with the British Embassy to investigate further and determine how such a dangerous event occurred. Beyond the loss of life, the crash caused significant disruption. The RM12, a major road connecting La Manga and Cartagena, was closed for several hours, causing traffic delays. Many questions remain. How was such a large and dangerous boat so poorly secured? Was this an accident, or was something more intentional involved? What other risks were present that night? The driver responsible for towing the boat is still missing, leaving a major gap in the investigation. Authorities continue to search for answers, but for now, the families of the victims are left grieving a tragic loss. A single moment of carelessness, or something more deliberate, turned a simple evening drive into a catastrophe. The search for the truth continues, but for those affected, the consequences of that night will never fade. On June 11, 2023, a terrible accident struck the Hunter Valley region of New South Wales, Australia. What began as a joyful wedding celebration ended in an unimaginable tragedy. The night was filled with laughter and dancing as guests gathered at Wandon Valley Estate in Lovedale to celebrate the wedding of Mitchell Gaffney and Madeline Edsel. As the festivities came to an end, 35 guests boarded a charter bus to return to their hotel in Singleton, a 30-minute drive away. The bus, a 2009 Volvo B7R operated by Link Bus Lines, was expected to take them back safely. At around 11:30 p.m., disaster struck. As the bus neared a roundabout at the M15 Wine Country Drive interchange near Greta, the driver, 58-year-old Brett Button, lost control. The vehicle overturned in thick fog, rolling onto its side. The crash was devastating. 10 people lost their lives and 25 others were injured. Some were rushed to hospitals, while one critically injured passenger was airlifted to Sydney for urgent care. The victims were beloved members of the community, Among them were 22-year-old Kaya McBride and her mother Nadine McBride, 52. Others included 21-year-old Kane Simons, 29-year-old Zachary Bray, Angus Craig, Tori Cowburn, and Rebecca Mullen, as well as Darcy Bullman, 30, and Andrew and Lynon Scott, both in their 30s. Many were part of the Singleton Roosters Australian Rules Football Club. Their sudden loss left the community in deep grief. Authorities launched an immediate investigation. Button was arrested at the scene and taken to Cessnock Police Station. A drug test revealed he had taken tramadol, a strong prescription painkiller, in the past 24 hours. The dosage was higher than recommended, and the medication is known to cause drowsiness and impair judgment. Further inquiries uncovered that Button had suffered from chronic pain since the 1990s and had been using tramadol for decades. In 2022, a doctor diagnosed him with dependence on the medication, leading to his removal from a previous job. Despite this, he continued working as a driver. Investigators later confirmed that Button had been speeding when he approached the roundabout, ignoring the poor visibility due to fog. His impaired state and reckless driving ultimately led to the crash. News of the crash spread quickly, leaving the nation in shock. Survivors not only faced physical injuries but also emotional trauma. Many later spoke in court about their terrifying experiences. One recalled being trapped under the wreckage, struggling to breathe. Another shared the heartbreak of losing a close friend that night. Button was initially charged with 10 counts of dangerous driving causing death and 1 count of negligent driving. As the investigation continued, prosecutors considered more serious charges. In January 2024, he was charged with manslaughter. However, in a later plea deal, those charges were dropped, upsetting many victims' families. Instead, Button pleaded guilty to 10 counts of dangerous driving causing death, along with other related offenses. During the trial, it was revealed that he knowingly took more tramadol than prescribed before driving. He had even joked about the risks. In court, he admitted full responsibility for the tragedy. In September 2024, Button was sentenced to 32 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 24 years. While this provided some closure, many families felt the justice system had not gone far enough. The decision to drop the manslaughter charges left them frustrated, believing the full impact of the tragedy had not been recognized. In response to the tragedy, a fundraising campaign was launched to support the victims' families. The Hunter Valley Bus Tragedy Fund, managed by Rotary, raised nearly $1.5 million to assist with medical expenses, funeral costs, and financial hardships. Donations poured in from across Australia, even from people who had never met the victims. As time passed, many questioned if the crash could have been prevented. Should Button have been allowed to drive despite his medical history? Could stricter monitoring of commercial drivers have made a difference? And were bus safety measures strong enough to prevent such a disaster? For the victims' families, these questions remain unanswered. They now face the painful reality of moving forward without their loved ones. As for Brett Button, he will spend decades in prison, carrying the weight of a decision that changed so many lives in an instant. On July 18, 1969, on Chappaquiddick Island, off Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, an event involving Senator Edward Ted Kennedy would leave lasting questions and alter his career forever. At 37, Ted Kennedy was a rising figure in American politics, the youngest of the Kennedy brothers. His brothers, President John F. Kennedy and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, had both been tragically killed. In 1969, Ted was a key figure in the Senate, serving as the youngest Senate Majority Whip and being seen as a possible candidate for president in 1972. That day, Kennedy had been part of a boat race near Martha's Vineyard. Afterward, he attended a gathering with friends and political figures, including 6 women who had worked on Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign. One of them was 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne, a political secretary with a bright future. Around 11 p.m., Kennedy left the party with Mary Jo, claiming he was giving her a ride back to her hotel. However, she had left behind her handbag and room key, casting doubt on his explanation. Around midnight, a police officer saw Kennedy's car speeding on an unpaved road near Chappaquiddick. As the car neared a small bridge, Kennedy lost control and the car plunged into a tidal pond, landing upside down. Kennedy managed to escape but said he couldn't reach Mary Jo, who was trapped inside. The water was cold and the current was strong. Instead of getting immediate help, Kennedy walked back to the party, passing several houses. He told his cousin, Joseph Gargan, and his friend, Paul Markham, about the incident, but no one called the authorities. Kennedy then left and swam to Edgartown, where he was staying. He changed into dry clothes, which raised suspicions later on. Hotel staff reported seeing him walking calmly around the hotel. The next morning, he seemed unaffected, even complaining about noise from a nearby party. It wasn't until mid-morning that he finally reported the accident. By that time, fishermen had already found the car and divers recovered Mary Jo's body. The delayed response and Kennedy's actions raised many questions. Why didn't he get help right away? Could she have been saved if he had acted sooner? The investigation was brief. Kennedy gave a televised statement saying he was overwhelmed with panic and grief, which led him to leave the scene. But details of the night remained unclear. Later reports revealed Kennedy had told friends and family to stay quiet about the events. Many suspected his actions were more about protecting his political career than responding out of concern. Despite the unusual circumstances, no autopsy was performed on Mary Jo's body. There were rumors that she might have been pregnant, but there was no evidence to support this. John Farrar, the diver who recovered her body, suggested that she could have survived for hours inside an air pocket in the car. If Kennedy had sought help sooner, she might have been saved. In the days after the incident, Kennedy appeared deeply shaken. His friends described him as withdrawn, and his wife, Joan, suffered a miscarriage during this time. His father, Joseph Kennedy Sr., whose health was already declining, reportedly worsened after the scandal. Legally, Kennedy faced little consequence. He pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident and received a 2-month suspended sentence. Despite the controversy, Kennedy continued to serve in the Senate for decades and became a respected lawmaker, though the Chappaquiddick event severely impacted his reputation and dashed his presidential aspirations. Mary Jo Kopechne's story is often overshadowed by the political fallout. Her life ended under unclear circumstances, and the unanswered questions about that night remain. Could things have turned out differently if Kennedy had acted sooner? The Chappaquiddick incident remains one of the most debated events in American political history, leaving behind questions that continue to linger.
Bessie Smith, one of the most influential figures of the Jazz Age, was a force to be reckoned with. She was known as the Empress of the Blues and was revered for her powerful voice and emotional depth. But when her life was cut short in a terrifying car crash, rumors and controversy surrounding her death started swirling. Bessie Smith was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, on April 15, 1894. She came from a very low-income family. Bessie and her 6 siblings were orphaned from an early age and left to fend for themselves. As such, Bessie took to performing on street corners for pennies. She was a talented singer and dancer. Later, she joined a traveling troupe that featured another blues legend, Ma Rainey, who helped Bessie develop a stage persona. By the 1920s, Bessie's career had taken off. Her soulful voice captivated audiences. She signed with Columbia Record in 1923 and became her era's most popular female blues singer. But when the Great Depression took hold of the United States, Bessie's popularity began to wane. As such, she took up smaller performances in clubs and theaters nationwide, which required her to travel frequently. It was during one of these travels that Bessie Smith's life came to an abrupt end. Bessie and her lover, Richard Morgan, traveled on US Route 61 between Memphis, Tennessee and Clarksdale, Mississippi on September 26, 1937. It was nearly 2 a.m. Richard was driving. There was a slow-moving truck just ahead of them. Richard attempted to maneuver around the car, but he misjudged the truck's speed. This misjudgment resulted in a high-speed side-impact collision. The roof of their vehicle was torn off, and Bessie, who was seated in the passenger seat, sustained horrible injuries. Her right arm was nearly severed at the elbow, and she had extensive crush injuries on the right side of her body. Richard Morgan was unscathed, but Bessie lay critically injured in the middle of the road. That's how the first person on the scene, a surgeon named Hugh Smith found her. He quickly realized Bessie required immediate medical attention. He stabilized her as best he could, dressing her injured arm with a clean handkerchief, while his colleague proceeded to call an ambulance. Tragedy almost struck again when another car rushing towards the scene collided with Dr. Smith's parked vehicle, nearly missing Bessie Smith. Eventually, as Bessie's state deteriorated, 2 ambulances arrived, one from a black hospital and one from a white hospital. Because of the segregation laws of the Deep South, Smith was taken to Clarksdale's G.T. Thomas Afro-American Hospital. Her arm had to be amputated, but Bessie Smith never regained consciousness. She succumbed to her injuries that morning. That's when rumors started swirling. Some people claimed Bessie died after being denied admission to a whites-only hospital. Jazz writer John Hammond perpetuated this myth in a 1937 Downbeat magazine piece, eventually laying the foundation for Edward Albee's 1959 play, The Death of Bessie Smith. Dr. Hugh Smith, who treated her on the site, dismissed the claim, noting that no ambulance in that area would have considered transporting an African-American patient to a whites-only hospital at the time. Bessie Smith was buried in Philadelphia on October 4, 1937. Thousands of mourners came to pay their respects to the Empress of the Blues. Sadly, her grave remained unmarked for decades. During those years, her estranged husband, Jack G., thwarted efforts to erect a headstone. In 1970, a tombstone was finally placed on Bessie's grave, funded by singer Janis Joplin and Juanita Green, a friend of Bessie's.
It was August 5, 2022, in Los Angeles' Mar Vista neighborhood. Anne Heche, a famous actress known for roles in Volcano and I Know What You Did Last Summer, was driving her Mini Cooper. That morning, something went terribly wrong. Around 11:01 a.m., Heche lost control of her car and crashed into a home on Walgrove Avenue. The impact was intense, and the car immediately caught fire. Witnesses said she was speeding at around 80 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. The house was heavily damaged, and the flames consumed both the car and Heche, trapping her inside. Emergency responders arrived quickly but struggled with the fire and the structural damage. It took firefighters about 30 minutes to rescue Heche from the burning vehicle, during which time she inhaled a large amount of smoke. Heche was critically injured and taken to the hospital, eventually being transferred to the Grossman Burns Center in West Hills. She suffered severe second-degree burns on 12% of her body, including her face, neck, shoulders, and chest, along with first-degree burns on 40% of her body. She also fractured her sternum, adding to her pain and critical condition. Medical teams worked tirelessly to save her, performing skin grafts on her neck, torso, and limbs. Despite their efforts, Heche never regained consciousness. She was placed on life support, but her condition did not improve. On August 11th, 6 days after the crash, Heche was declared brain dead, which is considered legal death in California. Her heart continued to beat as she remained on life support for organ donation, fulfilling a wish she had long expressed. Her family honored this desire through the One Legacy Foundation. Heche's oldest son, Homer, who was 20, shared his grief in a statement. "My brother Atlas and I lost our mom. After 6 days of almost unbearable emotional swings, I am left with a deep sadness. Hopefully my mom is free from pain now." He also thanked friends, family, and fans for their support during that difficult time. Hollywood was stunned by Heche's death, and tributes poured in from colleagues and fans. Ellen DeGeneres, Heche's former partner, expressed her sorrow, tweeting, "This is a sad day. I'm sending Anne's children, family, and friends all of my love." Actress Patricia Arquette also honored Heche, saying, "Rest in peace now, Anne. She was a wildly talented actress who endured more pain than anyone should have to." The investigation into the crash revealed that Heche died from inhalation and thermal injuries, as well as a fractured sternum from the collision. Although toxicology tests showed traces of certain controlled substances in her system, it was confirmed that one of the substances had been administered in the hospital for pain relief. The coroner determined that Heche was not under the influence at the time of the accident. Anne Heche's death was officially ruled an accident. Despite the quick response of emergency crews, the intensity of the fire and the structural damage delayed her rescue, leading to her tragic end. Heche's career spanned decades, with her rise to fame beginning in the late 80s and 90s through roles in the soap opera Another World and movies like Wag the Dog and 6 Days, 7 Nights. Her performance in the 2004 film Gracie's Choice earned her critical acclaim and a Primetime Emmy nomination. She also received a Tony Award nomination for her role in 20th Century on Broadway. Beyond her acting, Heike was known for her courage in standing up for her beliefs. Her relationship with Ellen DeGeneres in the late 90s was groundbreaking at a time when same-gender relationships were not widely accepted in Hollywood. She faced backlash for her decision, including the loss of a major studio contract, but remained committed to her principles. Heche's personal life had its struggles. She married Coleman Coley LaFoon in 2001, and they had a son named Homer. After their divorce in 2009, she had another son, Atlas, with actor James Tupper. Despite her challenges, Heche was a devoted mother. Anne Heche's legacy endures through her films and the impact she had on those who knew her. She will be remembered for her talent, her bravery, and her desire to spread love and kindness. It was April 25, 2002, in La Ceiba, Honduras. Lisa Left Eye Lopez, the famous rapper from TLC, was on a spiritual retreat searching for peace. She was 30 years old and had experienced both success and hardships in her life. After the challenges she faced in her career and personal life, Lisa decided to take this journey in the quiet jungles of Honduras to find clarity and healing. A few weeks earlier, Lisa was involved in a tragic accident. A 10-year-old boy named Bayron Fuentes was hit by the minibus she was riding in, driven by her assistant. Despite their best efforts to save him, the boy passed away. This event deeply affected Lisa. Strangely, the boy had the same last name as hers, Lopez, which made her believe that a spirit meant to take her life had taken the boy's life by mistake. This thought weighed heavily on her as she continued her spiritual journey. During her stay in Honduras, Lisa filmed her experiences with a handheld camera, capturing her thoughts on life, love, and death. These recordings were later turned into a documentary called The Last Days of Left Eye. It revealed a vulnerable side of Lisa that few had seen. Behind her fiery public image, she struggled with past pain, including her troubled childhood and her rocky relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Andre Risson. She had once set fire to his shoes in a fit of anger, but deep down she was seeking inner peace. While in Honduras, Lisa practiced fasting, meditation, and followed an alkaline diet, influenced by Dr. Sebi, who claimed it could cure diseases. She believed this would bring her the spiritual clarity she longed for. Despite her efforts, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was about to happen. On the day of her death, Lisa and her friends were driving in a rented Mitsubishi Montero, filming more footage for her documentary. Lisa was driving when she reportedly swerved to avoid a car that had stopped suddenly in front of her. She lost control of the car, which flipped several times. Lisa, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was thrown from the vehicle. The injuries to her head and chest were fatal. Of the 8 people in the car, she was the only one who died. Lisa's death shocked the world. Her vibrant energy and talent left a lasting mark on the music industry. TLC had been one of the most influential music groups of the 1990s, and Lisa's unique voice and style were key to their success. Although it was confirmed that Lisa had been speeding, the influence of substances and alcohol were ruled out as causes. It was simply a tragic accident. In the weeks following her death, fans and fellow artists expressed their grief. Lisa's presence left a void that could never be filled. The footage she filmed during her time in Honduras was released in 2007 as The Last Days of Left Eye, offering a glimpse into her spiritual journey and final thoughts. Even after her death, there were lingering questions. Some wondered if her belief that a spirit had mistakenly taken Bayron's life instead of hers was somehow connected to her own death. The fact that they shared the same last name only added to the mystery. These unanswered questions left fans speculating about her final days. Her mother, Wanda Lopez, later filed a lawsuit against Mitsubishi, claiming that the vehicle Lisa had been driving was prone to rollovers. Though this brought attention to the car's safety, the outcome of the lawsuit remains unclear. In a painful twist, photos of Lisa's body were leaked online shortly after her death, causing more heartache for her family and outraging her fans. Despite this violation of privacy, Lisa's legacy has continued to shine through her music and the memories of those who knew and loved her. TLC continued, but Lisa's absence was always felt. Tion T-Boz Watkins and Rosanda Chili Thomas honored their friend in many ways, though the loss was always heavy. To this day, fans still wonder about the mysteries surrounding Lisa's final weeks. It was the early morning of September 27, 1986, when tragedy struck Metallica. The band was in Sweden, touring Europe after the success of their third album, Master of Puppets. At just 24 years old, their bassist, Cliff Burton, had already made a significant impact on the heavy metal scene. Many believed his talent would help the band reach new heights, but fate had other plans. Metallica was at a peak in their career. Master of Puppets had gone gold, and fans were captivated by the band's aggressive style. A lot of their success was credited to Burton, whose unique bass playing added depth to their sound. He pushed the limits of what a bassist could do, using distortion and effects to bring a new dimension to their music. Cliff was seen as a genius, someone who would keep driving the band creatively, but his life was cut short. After a show, the band boarded their tour bus, traveling from Sweden to Copenhagen. Tired from constant touring, the members went to their bunks to rest. Cliff Burton and guitarist Kirk Hammett played cards to decide who would sleep in the best bunk. Burton drew the ace of spades, winning the spot, and Hammett took another bunk without knowing how significant this moment would become. Around 7 a.m., disaster struck. The bus lost control and slid off the road. The driver claimed they hit black ice, causing the vehicle to flip over. Burton, who was asleep in his top bunk, was thrown through the window, and the bus landed on him, killing him instantly. The band was devastated. Frontman James Hetfield searched the area for the black ice the driver mentioned, but found nothing, which raised suspicions. To this day, the band questions whether black ice was really to blame, or if the driver's fatigue or another issue caused the accident. The scene was horrifying. Kirk Hammett remembers the crew's screams and the sight of Burton trapped under the bus. Efforts to free him were unsuccessful. A crane was brought in to lift the bus, but it slipped, dropping the vehicle back onto Burton's body. Whether Cliff died in the first or second impact is unknown, but either way, he was gone. The accident left Metallica shattered. Hetfield was filled with anger, questioning the driver and even walking miles in the cold, trying to make sense of what happened. Hammett spent the first day in denial, unable to accept the reality of losing his friend. When the band returned home, the grief hit them even harder. Cliff was more than just a bassist. He was a key figure in the band's creative direction and a close friend. News of Cliff Burton's death shocked the metal world. At just 24, he had already become a legend. His body was sent to a local hospital in Sweden, where an autopsy confirmed that he had died from multiple injuries. No substances or alcohol were involved, silencing rumors that had spread after the accident. Still, doubts about the bus driver's story remained, with some suspecting fatigue as the real cause. The driver was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the band was left with unanswered questions. The true cause of the crash remains a mystery, and it continues to haunt Metallica to this day. After the accident, the band faced a difficult decision. Should they continue or disband? Their manager, Peter Mensch, encouraged them to move forward and use their grief to fuel their music. Though it seemed impossible at first, they eventually realized that carrying on would be the best way to honor Cliff's legacy. The band hired Jason Newsted as their new bassist, and in 1988 they released And Justice for All, their first album without Burton. Although Newsted stepped into the role, many fans could feel Cliff's absence. Tracks like To Live Is to Die and Orion served as tributes to him, ensuring his influence remained a part of Metallica's sound. Though Metallica went on to achieve more success, they were never quite the same. Cliff Burton's death left a void that could never be filled. In 2009, he was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, forever securing his place as one of the greatest bassists in history. On December 15, 1995, a devastating accident took place near Castleindinas, a hill fort close to Newquay, Cornwall. It was 6:30 p.m. when a routine drive turned into a disaster that would change many lives. Mark Wade, a 31-year-old truck driver from Fradden, had been on the road since early morning, transporting a Caterpillar digger on a low-loader lorry. He was exhausted after a long workday and was heading back to his company's depot in St. Column. He had no idea that a small mistake would lead to tragedy. The digger's arm, which should have been securely fastened, was left loose. As Wade drove along a narrow B road, the unsecured arm swung into the opposite lane. At that moment, 4 cars were approaching from the other direction. The impact was catastrophic. The heavy digger arm crashed into the cars, ripping off their roofs and causing immediate destruction. 5 people lost their lives instantly. 3 men and 2 women, including a passenger. 3 others suffered severe injuries, including head trauma. The scene was horrific. Emergency services rushed in with 10 ambulance crews from towns like Newquay, Wadebridge, Penzance, and Bodmin working tirelessly to help the injured. Firefighters and police officers fought to control the chaotic scene. However, for 5 people, nothing could be done. The scale of the destruction left many first responders deeply affected, with some later needing psychological counseling. Authorities quickly began investigating how this accident had happened. It was discovered that the digger's arm should have been secured with a metal pin and chains. These were available on the truck, but Wade had not used them. He believed the load was stable, unaware that he was handling it incorrectly. Further inquiries revealed that Wade had never received proper training on how to transport heavy machinery safely. His employers, Baisley Plant Hire and Chepstow Plant Hire, had failed to provide the necessary instruction. As a result, both companies were held responsible for negligence. They were fined a total of £500,000 for failing to ensure safety procedures were followed. Wade, however, was not given a prison sentence. Instead, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital after being diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and depression. 2 psychiatric reports confirmed that he was mentally unwell due to the accident. Judge Graham Cottle described Wade as a hard-working man who never intended harm. A petition signed by over 1,000 people urged the court to show leniency, emphasizing that Wade was already suffering from the emotional burden of what had happened. The judge agreed, acknowledging that Wade would carry the weight of that night for the rest of his life. For the families of the victims, the pain of losing their loved ones was permanent. But they weren't the only ones struggling. Many first responders who arrived at the scene that night carried the emotional scars for years. One of them was Richard Bobeck, a firefighter from St. Columb Major Fire Station. Richard was one of the first on site, witnessing the devastating wreckage and the loss of young lives. The experience deeply affected him. Richard was known as a dedicated firefighter and a loving father to his 2 daughters, Selena and Anya. However, the trauma of that night overwhelmed him. 8 months later, unable to cope with what he had seen, Richard tragically passed away. At the time, awareness of PTSD was not as widespread, and Richard did not receive the mental health support he needed. His daughters later spoke about how their father's loss changed their lives forever. Selena shared emotional memories of him, recalling his kindness and the years they lost together. Years later, Richard's dedication was honored. His name was added to the National Fire Brigade Memorial in London, and a plaque was placed at St. Colum's Fire Station. Retired and current firefighters attended the ceremony, sharing stories of his humor and generosity. The Castle and Denis crash remains one of Cornwall's darkest moments. The consequences extended beyond that night, affecting families, first responders, and even Mark Wade himself. The accident is a reminder of the devastating impact that one small mistake can have. It was February 13, 2024, in Mesa, Arizona. Ray Longy, a 67-year-old father, grandfather, and aviation enthusiast, was on his way to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport to pick up his wife. It was a simple drive, something he had done many times before. Ray had a deep love for airplanes, living near Falcon Field Airport, where he often watched aircraft take off and land. His family joked that he could recognize a plane just by its engine sound. But on this day, Ray would never make it to the airport. As he drove his red Lexus down Greenfield Road, a private jet was preparing for takeoff at Falcon Field. The jet, a high-end business aircraft, started down the runway, but something went terribly wrong. It couldn't lift off, lost control, and crashed straight into Ray's car. The impact was catastrophic. Ray lost his life instantly. The jet didn't stop. It skidded off the road and into an orchard where it burst into flames. Inside the aircraft were 4 passengers: Drew Kimball, 44, his 12-year-old son Graham Kimball, Spencer Lindahl, 43, and Rustin Randall, 48. Sadly, none of them survived. A teenage passenger managed to escape but suffered severe burns and was rushed to the hospital. Witnesses said the plane never left the ground. What should have been a routine takeoff turned into a disaster within seconds. Ray had been only blocks from his home when it happened, making it even harder for his family to comprehend. How could something like this happen so close to where he had spent years watching planes come and go? Ray's passion for aviation went beyond watching planes. He worked in the industry, including time and sales, and even lived in Taiwan for 8 years. He knew everything about aircraft and loved sharing his knowledge. His daughter, Lorraine, remembered how he used to take her outside as a child to watch planes take off. They would stand together in their yard just minutes from Falcon Field, as he explained how each aircraft worked. Even with all his knowledge of planes, nothing could have prepared him for what happened that day. Lorraine was in disbelief. "When I heard there was an accident, I assumed it was a car crash," she said. "But when I found out a plane was involved, I couldn't believe it. My dad lived next to that airport for years. How could this happen?" For Ray's family, the loss felt unreal. He had spent so much of his life fascinated by aviation, yet in the end, a plane crash took him away. But Ray wasn't just a man who loved airplanes. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. He enjoyed spending time with his wife, Ada, his children, and his 1-year-old grandson, Charles. Lorraine described him as larger than life, someone who was caring, adventurous, and always looking out for others. Just minutes before the crash, Ray had sent Lorraine a simple message. "Everything okay?" It was something he did often, a way to check in and show he cared. Looking back, Lorraine saw it as more than just a routine text. It was a reminder of his love. That final message became one of her last memories of him. Lorraine struggled to accept what had happened. "It's so unfair," she said, "but I know my dad wouldn't want us to stay stuck in sadness. He'd want us to keep going." As Ray's family tried to understand the tragedy, the National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation into the crash. But waiting for answers was difficult. "My family and I need to know what happened," Lorraine said. "This shouldn't have happened." Ray had always been passionate about helping others. He supported Sunshine Acres Children's Home in Mesa, often donating during the holidays. In his memory, his family encouraged people to contribute to the charity if they wanted to honor him. For those who knew Ray, his passing was heartbreaking. He wasn't just someone who loved planes. He was a family man who brought joy to those around him. His absence left a deep void in the lives of his loved ones. As the investigation continues, many questions remain. Could this accident have been prevented? Was it a mechanical issue, human error, or something else entirely? For Ray's family, these questions aren't just about finding out what went wrong. They are a painful reminder that he is gone. But despite the grief, Lorraine holds on to the memories of her father, the laughter, the love, and the moments they shared. Ray Longy's life was full of adventure and kindness. Though his story ended in tragedy, his impact will never be forgotten.
It was September 30th, 1955, and actor James Dean was driving his beloved Porsche 550 Spider to Salinas, California, where he would participate in a car race. At 24 years old, James's star was on the rise. He was young, talented, and beautiful, with an aura of mystery and rebellion that enchanted the public. But James Dean also loved racing, a newfound love that soon intersected tragically with his life and career. Born in Marion, Indiana, James Byron Dean grew up with a restless spirit and a determination to make his mark in the world. He studied drama at UCLA and quickly distinguished himself as a remarkable talent. Filmmakers were drawn to his talent and intensity, which resulted in his breakthrough performance in Elia Kazan's East of Eden. He was one of the most promising actors of his generation and would have possibly become one of the world's greatest actors. But it was not for his passion for speed and danger. By late September 1995, James Dean had just finished shooting a film named Giant and was eager to return to motorsport. He allegedly dreamed of competing in the Indianapolis 500 race in the future. His recent financial success from East of Eden had allowed him to invest in his passion by purchasing a Triumph Tiger motorcycle and a Porsche 356 Speedster. James later traded the Porsche 356 for a faster, better car, a convertible Porsche 550 Spider, which he lovingly called Little Bastard, a name that would remain in history. On September 30th, 1955, James Dean was at Competition Motors in Hollywood alongside his Porsche mechanic, Rudy Wutherich. They intended to get the little bastard ready for the Salinas race. At first, Dean planned to tow the Porsche behind a station wagon the whole way to the race. But Wutherick suggested that Dean drive the Spider to Salinas to get more miles and experience under his new car. After Dean gave his okay, Wutherick, Warner Brothers stunt driver Bill Hickman, and photographer Stanford H. Roth left Hollywood and headed north on US Route 99, stopping briefly for petrol. At around 3:30 p.m. that day, Dean was stopped by the California Highway Patrol south of Bakersfield, where he was cited for speeding at 65 miles per hour in a 55 miles per hour. The group headed west on SR 166 SR 33 towards Blackwell's Corner via a well-known route to sports car drivers. Once there, they met with other drivers and departed Blackwell's Corner at 5:15 p.m., heading west on US Route 466 towards Salinas. It was around 5:45 p.m., and James Dean and Rudy Wuterich were driving westward. Their companions were far behind. The incident happened near the junction of what was then known as US Route 466, now State Route 46, and State Route 41. As James Dean drove towards the west, another car, a 1950 Ford Tudor driven by a 23-year-old called Donald Turnipseed, was heading east. When Turnipseed made a left turn onto SR 41, he crossed directly into the path of James Dean's speeding Porsche, little bastard. Dean had just enough time to realize what was going to happen. As such, he attempted a racing maneuver to avoid impact, but it was too late. The two cars collided almost head-on. Little bastard cartwheeled through the air before landing in a gully beside the road. When authorities arrived, James Dean was extricated from the wreckage. He was unconscious and severely injured. His left foot was crushed between the clutch and brake pedals. He had a broken neck, crushed legs, and multiple fractures and lacerations. Wuterich had been thrown from the car, but he was still conscious, suffering from a fractured jaw, hip, and other injuries. The driver of the Ford, Donald Turnipseed, sustained only minor injuries. James Dean was transported to the Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital, where at 6:20 p.m. on September 30th, 1955, James Dean was pronounced dead on arrival. An inquest held on October 11th, 1955, concluded that Dean's death was accidental, and Turnipseed was not found guilty of any wrongdoing. However, the accident would haunt Turnipseed for the rest of his life, and he rarely spoke publicly about it. The news of James Dean's death shocked the world and Hollywood. His most famous movie, Rebel Without a Cause, was released nearly a month after Dean died in a car accident. The film immortalized the actor and helped paint the picture of a tragic hero gone too soon. November 30th, 2013, started pleasantly for Paul Walker. The 40-year-old actor, most famous for his role in the beloved Fast and Furious franchise, was spending his day with his mother and his 15-year-old daughter, Meadow. The three were chatting about buying a Christmas tree when Paul received a message, suddenly reminded of an event he needed to attend. He left in a hurry, completely unaware of the tragic fate that awaited him, a fate that would soon shock the world. Paul Walker, born Paul William Walker IV on September 12, 1973, in Glendale, California, was destined for the spotlight from an early age. With a mother who worked as a model and a father who was a former amateur boxer, Paul was immersed in entertainment from a young age, setting the stage for his future as a beloved Hollywood star. Paul's career began at the age of 2 with a Pampers commercial, and he went on to have minor roles in television shows like Highway to Heaven and Charles in Charge while in school. His career took off in the late 1990s, appearing in films such as Pleasantville and She's All That. However, his performance as Brian O'Connor, an undercover cop in The Fast and the Furious, which came out in 2001, rocketed him to fame and established his place in Hollywood. Throughout his acting career, Paul Walker was known for his passion for cars and racing and his dedication to charity work. A combination of those three passions brought his early demise on November 30th, 2013. That day, he attended a charity event organized by his non-profit, Reach Out Worldwide. The event was held at a high-performance car shop owned by Paul and his friend Roger Rodas, a former race car driver who also managed Walker's finances. After the event, Paul and Roger decided to go for a ride in a 2005 Porsche Carrera GT, a high-speed sports car that was difficult to handle. It was around 3:30 p.m. Paul and Roger had just left the event. Roger was behind the wheel, and Paul was in the passenger seat. The Porsche had an estimated speed of 100 miles per hour. That's when Roger lost control of the car. The Porsche hit a curb, a tree, and a light post, and struck another tree. Then, it burst into flames. Those attending the charity, employees and friends alike, came running, but were met with a devastating sight. The car was engulfed in fire, and their attempts to rescue Paul and Roger proved futile. Roger's young son also witnessed the catastrophic accident. Both males were pronounced dead at the scene. Paul Walker died from a combination of severe traumatic injuries and burns. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department ultimately ruled that the car's speed and the tire's age were the main factors in the crash. Their examination revealed that the vehicle was traveling at speeds ranging from 80 to 100 miles per hour when it lost control, and there were no signs of drugs or alcohol in either man. The whole world found out about the accident within mere hours. The tragic event sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Fans and colleagues mourned the loss of Paul Walker, who was well liked and admired. Paul's daughter, Meadow, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Porsche, claiming that design flaws in the Carrera GT caused her father's death. While Porsche argued that the car had been abused and altered, both sides eventually settled the lawsuit under confidential terms in 2015. Paul Walker died while filming Furious 7, forcing the production to halt while the producers asked his family how to proceed. His brother Cody Walker came in to help finish the remaining scenes, using CGI to honor Walker's memory on screen. The crash scene in Santa Clarita became a makeshift monument, with fans worldwide leaving flowers, letters, and mementos in memory of the late actor.